You're listening to Accounted For, the Canadian podcast that explores the intangibles of every career. I'm your host, Daniel Lee. Good morning, everyone, or I guess generally hello. How are you? Happy Wednesday. Today's podcast is with Marty Kratky-Katz of Blockthrough. He is the co-founder and CEO of the company, and Blockthrough is based out of Toronto. And the startup itself helps the publishers recoup some of the advertising dollars that they lose out to adblockers, whilst creating a ad-friendly experience for the actual website's customers. Marty has been an entrepreneur for close to 9 years, and Blockthrough is his third company. So in our conversation, we go through like each of Marty's different startups, the learnings associated with each of them, the bumps and bruises, and the reality, like the true reality of what it's really like to be a founder. And I can tell you, like, it's, not all the roses and just luxury stuff that you see with what the media portrays. And we just get into like the real deal of what it's actually like and why it's really not for the faint of heart. Entrepreneurship, I think, has gone the branding that it's just really easy to be or call yourself an entrepreneur because the barrier to it is just so low. You can just quit your job and say, I'm an entrepreneur now. But yeah, we cover everything in Marty's journey from, finding investors, surviving as a company, parting ways with a co-founder. Like, how do you do that? And just withstanding, the parental pressures that he had to go through of like not being a doctor. And yeah, like these are all issues that he had to go through, and I think these are issues that a lot of different people would face on their own if they wanted to become an entrepreneur. And so this is a conversation I truly, really enjoyed. It's just jam-packed with the real look into the life of an entrepreneur, and I really hope you enjoy it as much as I have. And so before I send you off, just a quick reminder, please support the podcast if you like it. The best way to support it is to give a 5-star rating on iTunes, and also leaving a review. If you can, even just a 1-sentence review makes a big difference. And if you do, I'll give you a shout out. So please do that. Just give me 5 minutes of your time on top of the hour you put into listening to my stuff. And other than that, if you want to stay in touch with me in terms of my own developments, want to be part of my newsletter and just read more about my learnings and my blog posts, then please subscribe. You can click the subscribe button at oldmandan.com. And so yeah, thanks a lot. And without further ado, here's my chat with Marty. Hey everyone, welcome back to Accounted For. Today on the podcast we have Marty Kratky-Katz. He is the co-founder and CEO of Blockthrough. Hey Marty, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And so to begin off, would you mind describing Blockthrough to our audience?
Yeah, so Blockthrough helps web publishers recover the revenue they lose to ad blocking without upsetting their users. So basically what that means is we have a product that's able to get ads through ad blockers in a way that doesn't get blocked. But we make it a really light experience, so no animations, no video, no audio, just a really super light ad experience so the website can make money, and you as an ad block user don't need to be prompted to turn off your ad blocker. You don't need to whitelist the site. It's just a really nice light ad experience that you're willing to tolerate, and if you really don't like it, you can go and opt out and turn it off, and we'll respect that.
Gotcha. And so, for example, for someone like me who runs a blog and I don't have enough traffic yet, but when I do and I start getting advertisers on it, I would probably end up using services like yours to help recoup some of the revenue I might lose from ad block.
Exactly, yeah. So the average web publisher has an ad block rate on desktop of 20 to 30%. Some industries it's a lot higher, like in gaming it's 50 to 70%. And so basically if you were using your sort of standard ad networks or ad exchanges to monetize your traffic, a certain percentage of that traffic would be running an ad blocker, and that's where we come in. You'd run our code, and at the end of the month you'd make 20 to 30% more. There's a way to validate how much that is, and then we bill you at the end of the month for a percentage of that revenue that we've helped you recover.
Gotcha. I think this is a global phenomenon, right?
It is, yeah. So in North America, the average ad block rate on desktop is, I think, 26% is the last number I saw.
Lower than I thought.
Well, so in our demographic, it's substantially higher in the like 18 to 34 age bracket. It's like close to 50%, if not higher. And then, as you go higher in age, then the ad block rate decreases. It does tend to skew a little more male, but globally, it's mainstream, right? In Europe, it's a third of the population uses an ad blocker on desktop. Interestingly, mobile ad block rates are substantially lower, but I think that's a function of the adoption just lagging in North America and Europe. And then in sort of the rest of the world, it's actually inverted. So mobile ad blocking in markets like India and China is much higher than desktop ad blocking, probably because they're sort of mobile first. There's not a lot of desktop usage. Yeah.
Oh, well, I didn't know that.
Sorry, there's more information than you asked for, but
no,
there it is.
I'm always more fascinated to learn more about different businesses and different worlds. Like, I used to analyze marketing and advertising companies before, and I was at the hedge fund, so I'm always fascinated to learn more about that world. And I'm actually part of that world now, so I might, one day be a customer of yours, I hope. And so, in terms of, I think, we were talking about like the globalization and stuff, but you yourself are kind of a, global person, like you're a dual citizen.
I am, yes. So I'm a Czech Canadian. I was born in Canada, born and raised in Canada. My mom and her family emigrated from Czechoslovakia in 1968 when the Soviet Union invaded, and they were from the Czech part. And so growing up in Canada, I was born in 1985. Grew up born in Montreal. Grew up mostly in Ottawa, but my grandparents lived around the corner. And I basically grew up in a Czech-speaking house in Canada, and spoke to my mom and my grandparents exclusively in Czech. And when I was 18, I found out that I was eligible to get Czech citizenship and retain my Canadian citizenship. I said that's a no-brainer. Like I associate with both my Czech side and my sort of Canadian upbringing. So it was. That was sort of how that evolved.
Gotcha. And you're also fluent in 5 languages.
Yeah,
You're the second person I've met who's fluent in 5 languages, and the other person is Estonian. And so I was wondering, is that an Eastern European thing?
I think it is. It definitely is. I think generally people who are from countries with that have their own language that speak with not a lot of speakers. Automatically, they have to learn like 2 or 3 languages just to like be able to communicate with their neighbors. And obviously not a lot of people in the world speak Czech. So most people in the Czech Republic speak Czech. They speak English. They if they don't speak Slovak, they understand it perfectly because they're very close. And then there's a lot of sort of historical affiliation with German-speaking populations and obviously with Russia or then the Soviet Union. So a lot of Czechs also speak either German and or Russian. And so I think that's part of the heritage is like as a Czech you get exposed to a lot of different languages, and in my case growing up in Ottawa I went to a bilingual school, English and French.
Gotcha.
So I grew up in a Czech speaking house. I went to a French school, so by the time I was in grade 1 I was speaking English, Czech and French. And then in high school, I started taking Spanish courses, and that was what really sort of made me realize that I was just totally in love with languages, and I think they're fascinating. And so when I got to university, for a variety of reasons, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I decided I should study something I love. If I'm not going to do something practical, then I should at least enjoy it. So I studied Russian as my major, with German as my minor. And then when I finished school, I think I spoke 6 languages fluently. I've since gotten rusty in Russian, so I don't count it as fluent anymore. But yeah, that's sort of how that came about.
Wow, so you're a legit 5 language fluent speaker. That's amazing. And I think that's the big important part where you said, oh, I went to university to study something I love, which is languages. And when I first learned that about you, I was thinking, that's so smart. You should just go learn to study something you want to learn. And like when I was in school, it wasn't a minor, but I had a requirement to focus all my electives in one area, and mine was in Greco-Roman history. Yeah, because that's what I loved, and those were the only classes where I actually could just go to class and not really read the textbook, and I'd be fine. Like I would breeze through it. I told my friends, "That's a bird course, man. It's so easy." Yeah. And then they'd all go and get wrecked and tell me that was not the case.
Like, you asshole!
Yeah.
You lied to me.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I mean, like when you're interested in stuff, you want to learn about it.
Yeah. And so then after university, you immediately went to being a founder of,
No, I didn't actually.
Oh, really?
No. So there was a gap there. So I'll give you a little more context.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a family of doctors, and growing up, they always said, Marty, you can do whatever you want as long as you're a doctor. And so the only thing I knew growing up is I don't want to be a fucking doctor. So of course I told you the part I got to school, had no idea what I wanted to do, studied languages. But while all this was happening, I grew up I guess it's fair to say that I played a ton of video games. And they weren't all multiplayer. So I spent a lot of time in my parents' basement just sort of on my own, not communicating with other human beings. And so when I got out of...
But you know a bunch of languages.
Yes, exactly. I had nobody to speak to, but I know all these languages. It's really, really useful. And so I got to the end of university and I graduated. I still had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to be a translator or a professor. Great, I learned that. And not knowing what I wanted to do, I kind of focused in on my own personal growth goals. And by the time I got to the end of university, I was 21, 22, and because I spent all my spare time playing video games, I had no social skills. I really had bad social anxiety. I would get nervous talking to strangers. And so I kind of realized at that point that I was never going to get anywhere in my career if I was not able to, communicate with strangers or communicate with other people effectively. So I took a sales job to challenge myself and to try to get out of my shell. And so at whatever it was, 22 or so, I took a job at, I don't know if you're familiar with T-Booth,
yes.
like Wireless Wave.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of those like cell phone resellers that basically sells all the different cell carriers. And so I worked at T-Booth. I took a break to go to Australia for a bit, but I worked at T-Booth for about a year and a half in total. Ended up moving, or maybe 2 years, ended up moving to Rogers at their call center. This would have been 2010, sorry. And so it was that experience at Rogers, working at their call center, doing wireless sales, that was the soul-draining experience that made me realize I never wanted to work at a big company ever again. I worked there for 6 months. I did quite well, but I felt like it was the kind of job where you're just a cog in a wheel. And there ended up being a situation where they weren't paying out my commission correctly. And I was just like, okay, I hate this job. They're not paying me when I'm supposed to get paid. So why should I even bother showing up? And my roommate at the time was really into startups, and he, serendipitously picked up a domain called ratemypolitician.com. And he and I were talking about it, and we kind of came up with this cool little idea where, we looked at that domain and said, okay, well, what if we built a website where any user can go and learn about either their representatives in public office or candidates for those roles, learn about them, and then rate their policies on various different criteria, the environment or overall or whatever. And there were enough people who thought it was a compelling idea that we said, okay, well, if we can compel a bunch of people to come to the site and rate their politicians in various facets, then we're collecting data that's valuable to politicians come election time. And we kind of suspected that maybe we could turn that into some sort of subscription analytics, like SaaS business, that would sell to politicians and not only allow them to know what people are saying about them and geolocate that, not to the person's house, but the rough neighborhood. Then they'd have a smart campaigning tool where they can say, okay, well, in this part of the community, I'm strong on the environment, but I'm weak on the economy, something like that. And so we thought it was a cool idea. I hated my job. And so my roommate, who then became my co-founder, said, dude, just quit it. Well, fuck it, we'll start a company. And that was just really, really attractive to me. Honestly, I grew up not knowing that you could do that. I didn't realize it was an option until I was in my early to mid-20s. I think it was 24 when we started Rate My Politician. And so, yeah, that's how that came about. We worked on that together for about a year. Had no idea what we were doing. So we made a lot of mistakes, but learned a lot. And so after about a year, we had a product in market. We had a few thousand users, but we just had no clear path to actually monetizing this thing, and nobody wanted to fund it. So we kind of realized that we could either keep digging a deeper hole and trying to make this work, or we could just shut it down and move on to whatever the next thing would be.
Gotcha. Did you have enough saved up to burn through those years?
So yeah, I was shocked at how lucrative selling cell phones was. I did not realize it paid so well. So I'd had some money saved up. I blew through all of it trying to build Rate My Politician. I spent my own personal money. I borrowed a little bit of money from friends and family, and I learned a lot of lessons.
Right. And if you guys kept it going, it would have blown up when Trump was going through.
You know, a lot of people say that. I tell the story, they're like, maybe you were before your time. Maybe it's possible. I don't like to look back and say like, what if? Even if that's the case, it was my first company. I still wouldn't have the experience to execute on it. I feel it was a difficult business to make work, and it's one thing if you have some relevant skill, like if I was able to sell, but like I knew nothing about software. I knew nothing about product management. I knew nothing about operations, finance, any of that stuff. I was a low-level sales guy. And so I think, I needed, you need some experience, some relevant experience to really thrive as a founder, I feel. It doesn't need to be, 10 years of management experience, but I think like, and that experience can come from failing in one company, but you do need, you have to learn a lot really, really fast to get it right as a first-time founder. And there's a handful of people who are brilliant enough to pull that off, and maybe I was, maybe I wasn't, but I didn't.
I'm also surprised that you said you were worried about your social skills earlier on,
Mm-hmm.
because from the past few times that we've chatted, I definitely did not feel that. My initial thought was, this guy's
thank you.
This guy's so extroverted.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean it's just another skill that you can train, and I mean you know all about training. So it's not dissimilar. At the end of the day, whether you're born with amazing social skills or not, if you practice and make a concerted effort and show self-awareness and really try to learn from the things that you do wrong, you will get better at it, no matter how low your starting point is. And same is true for me. I practiced through selling and just through talking to other people, and even today I sometimes do silly or say awkward things, but laugh it off and keep moving.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And my first job from university was, I did my first internship before even I went to the audit world was at a startup, and I did business development, which is a fancy way of saying a lot of cold calling.
Yeah.
It was a startup. And so
BDR.
yeah, exactly. And I'm calling like hundreds of companies a day and getting a lot of fuck yous. It's a way to desensitize you, and like you stop taking it personally most of the time, but still hurts, but you get better.
I think everybody should be forced to do a sales job for like, at least 3 to 6 months. Is obviously never going to happen, but I really feel like as a human being, you will become a better human being by being forced to do sales, because I think it instills empathy. When people tell you fuck you because you called them, because it's your job, it makes you like, it hurts sometimes, and that rejection sucks. But B, it makes you realize like, man, I never want to be that guy.
Yeah.
Like this really, really hurt, and like I'll get over it and I'll be fine. But to make other people feel that way is just not a good way to go about life, whether it's in business or whatever. It's just like I think real leaders excel at making the people around them feel good. And when they do well, and when people fuck up, they make them understand that it's a learning process and they can get better. And people who go out of their way to make other people feel like shit, well, being around those people sucks.
Totally, 100%. And also doing a sales job also lets you learn that you can't sell something that you just don't believe in or you hate.
Yep.
Which was the case with me, and I think was the case with you for most of the sales jobs, for like selling cell phones.
Yeah.
And like that also makes you think twice about just applying to a bunch of random jobs. You actually want to know about the company and what the company stands for.
At the same time, I think like any product that isn't terrible has some feature that you can get excited about. I mean, when I was selling cell phones, it wasn't about like convincing people to want something they didn't, at least not for me. The approach I took is like, well, like most people are on a shitty plan, and there's probably a better plan out there. And if I can convince somebody that, not only are they going to save $50 a month, but they can get a brand new shiny iPhone on top of that, I mean, that's a compelling value proposition to most people.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And that's something I personally could get excited about. I was like, dude, I just saved you some money, and I got you a new phone. Like, doesn't that work? So I think working. Even the most products have some redeeming quality that you can kind of force yourself to get excited
rationalize
about.
your decision.
Exactly. That's
totally.
a good way of putting it. Nationalize it. Sorry, I interrupted you, but that's
no. That's fine. And so you guys do rate my position, and you guys decide after about a year or so. Okay, let's just stop this. And what becomes the next move? Is that when you went back to school to learn computer science?
Yeah, that's correct. So I did sort of two things at the same time. So one is I desperately needed a job because I was fucking broke, and two, I realized from my experience with Rate My Politician that even vetting engineers or like getting any sense of whether they have any level of competence, if you've never written a line of code and you don't even understand what it means to write a line of code, like what is that like what is an algorithm? Then it's incredibly hard to vet someone, right? So I kind of had two simultaneous objectives. One is like I wanted to go work at a company that obviously was doing well and where I could learn some more, but I also wanted to like get technical. And so simultaneously, I went back to school for computer science at Ottawa U. It was like on a whim. They had my transcript on file because that's where I did my first undergrad. And like a week before the deadline, I was like, maybe I should do this. A friend suggested it, and I did it.
So you just applied for another bachelor's, just boom.
Yeah.
Nice.
Did Frosh at 25. and then I think within a month of that, I got a job working part-time at a company called Fluidware. So they were sort of like, they had a couple products. Their more sort of core product at the time was a product called Fluid Surveys, which was sort of like Canadian SurveyMonkey. And so I joined like just as they were starting to go through a period of hypergrowth. I think I was employee number 12 or 13. And when I left that place a year and 8 or 10 months later, there's 40 people, something along those lines. Wow. So basically the company quadrupled in size in a span of whatever it was, a year and a half, 2 years. So basically I started off at Fluidware managing, they were sort of experimenting with the Spanish-speaking market because I think SurveyMonkey wasn't that strong there, and they were like, great, that's an area where we can dive into. And so I was basically doing like everything from customer support to writing copy to like, there's a bunch of other things I can't even remember anymore, but basically I was working on managing an AdWords account. I was working pretty closely with Aiden, who was founder and CEO, and that was a fun experience. But I think for a variety of factors, it never the Spanish-speaking market never took off. I was kind of more focused on school. And then sort of towards the end of that, I switched. They put me in another role where I was focusing on sales and business, mostly sales, and there was a couple sort of like experimenting with partnerships and business development stuff, selling their other product, which was called Fluid Review. And that was a really cool experience, being at a startup that's in hypergrowth in the SaaS space. I learned a ton from not just the experience, but also from a relatively close relationship that I had with Aiden, who's a super bright guy. And so that's basically I was in school and I was at Fluidware. Towards the end of my first year of school, I kind of said, okay, I'm going to put this on pause because this Fluidware thing's starting to pick up. And as I was sort of working at Fluidware, I kind of I think from a sales perspective, I wasn't performing as well as I could. And I think the main reason for that is that it just wasn't my own. I think most founders, many founders, let's say, would not be able to do well in a job working for somebody else, and certainly at Fluidware, I don't think I did as well as I could have. And towards the end of my tenure there, maybe the last 4 to 6 months, in my free time, I was working on what would later become my next company. So my next company was Micrometrics. Which we did customer experience software for retail chains. Now they're more focused on, the company's still around, now they're more focused on customer experience software for hotel chains. And so the original idea was, when you walk into a retail store, like a big box brick and mortar retail store, the state of the art at the time was for collecting customer experience data or customer feedback was a little survey link at the bottom of a receipt, which not a lot of people fill that out. And if you walk into a store and you don't buy anything, you don't get a receipt. So a lot of these businesses collect virtually no data from their non-converting shoppers. And so our idea was that if you could build a really, really nice, user-friendly a survey system and deployed on iPads and kiosks by the exits of the store. And that would be a much more compelling format for people to fill out, and you'd be able to collect data from people who walk in and don't buy anything. And so those were the two sort of cool tricks that the product did. So we were able to collect about an order of magnitude more data than those receipt-based surveys. And then on top of that, we were able to collect data from these non-converting shoppers. And so we had some early success getting paid pilots with some major retailers, Chapters Indigo, Hudson's Bay, Roots. And so basically what happened is none of these pilots, it was great, it was exciting, we made a little bit of money, but at the end of the day, they wouldn't convert after the pilot. And the big problem with that business was that we needed to get somehow 500 iPads and 500 stands out to all of their locations, and get somebody to set those up, make sure they're connected to the Wi-Fi, make sure they're not going to get stolen. There's a lot of sort of logistical problems that needed solving, and we felt that there was no elegant way to solve all of those problems while still having a high margin business that scales well.
Right.
So we made the decision about 2.5 years in that we needed to make some changes and sort of move towards a more scalable product. My co-founders at the time, my co-founders decided that they wanted to move into the hotel space. So they basically wanted to do like surveys through the Wi-Fi, and then basically power a whole like customer feedback experience system on the basis of that as a starting point. And that's what they do today. They work with some really, really major hotel brands. Team is, I think, 25, 30 people. And they're still based in Ottawa. I'm still close with the founder, with my co-founders. But basically, we decided at that point they wanted to go in that direction. And I said, honestly, guys, at this stage of my career, I've realized that I find brick and mortar businesses incredibly dull. And I don't really want to do this anymore. So why don't you buy up my shares? You can go on to do this hotel thing, and I'll move. I'll go on to do my next thing. And so so we started in 2013, I think beginning of the year, and I sold my shares in May of 2015.
Okay, so that's your second startup.
Yeah.
And like how did it even like begin? You were at Fluidware, and then you just met your co-founders, and you guys just had an idea, and you're like, you know what, like the decision to just start a company, it's just how did it go about?
Yeah, so I mean there were a few elements to it. So one is, I mean, I knew that I wanted to start another company at some point. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm thinking about this entrepreneurship thing. It's like I've done it once before, I failed, I want to give it another crack. And I had a good friend named Artem who's CEO of Micrometrics now. And so Artem and I, we would see each other for coffee like every second day, go to the gym together, and when we would meet for coffee, we'd kind of or drinks, we would throw ideas back and forth, like, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? I think one of our ideas was like, this was like just when, like right before Halo started, or just around that time. You know Halo?
Yeah, the Xbox video game.
No. I mean, sorry, the taxi Halo.
Oh,
service.
the taxi.
Yeah.
It's actually funny because on the podcast I just interviewed this week the Canadian head for Halo.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, Justin.
Yeah, so that was one of the ideas we were looking at. We were like, what about this one? And we heard about this Halo company. We're like, maybe it's ship has sailed. I don't know. So we had a few ideas, and then one day we were at, I think it was Second Cup in Ottawa, and we were sitting there, and there were these like laminated QR codes, or laminated like sheets that were standing upright with like a QR code on it that said like, scan this QR code and give us your feedback. And I looked at it, I was like, who the hell does that? Like, I have never scanned a QR code in my life. Like, QR codes just never took off. It was one of those things that everybody thought they were going to be the next big thing, and like they just never materialized. At least not in North America.
Yeah, I think China's the only one that actually mainly just kills it.
Yeah, and I think there are lots of structural reasons for that, but the bottom line is like they never took off in North America. And here's a business that like is selling a product, meaning the guys who did the software behind the QR stuff. And they're like building a product based on this really, really shitty, non-engaging, uncompelling format, which is scan a QR code. And so we started to think like, well, it's not a retail business, but like, how do businesses like this collect data? And so we looked at doing restaurants, we looked at doing retail, we looked at a few different markets, and we really settled on retail. And so sorry, I kind of jumped ahead there. So basically, we had this idea. I think it was like January of 2015. there was this, because I was still in school, like taking one course at the time, there was this competition through the university that we were eligible for, which I think it was Startup Garage. You get like $20,000 as a grant, and we're like, fuck it, like why don't we just put together an application, and we hacked together a prototype. We basically like built a SurveyMonkey survey, put it on an iPad, and like went to a buddy of ours who had a small retail shop and said like, hey, do you want to run this like in your store and just see, like we bought a stand and see how many people fill it out. And over the first month, I think he got something like 300 signups, 300 participants.
Like just people just signing, just giving their feedback, no incentive, nothing?
Giving their feedback, and then the incentive was like, give us your email address and we'll send you a coupon. And people did it. And so we basically, in that application, we pointed out that we already had a customer. And long story short, it was like, oh, like it all happened very quickly within the span of a couple months, and they said yes, they awarded us one of the grants, and so we would have free office space and $20,000 as a starting point, and $20,000 is not a lot of money, but we were like, okay, like maybe we can do some more, and I think we won a couple other competitions. We ended up scraping together, I think over the first summer, like 50 to 70 grand. And
just
that
off of like government grants
grants and various things like that, I think at some point, I think it was May or so, that's when I sat down with Aiden, bought him dinner and said, sorry man, I'm leaving. And he was very supportive, and so that was how Micrometrics got started. It was sort of evenings and weekends, like applying for business plan competitions and getting a couple customers. I think we had another one or two pilot customers early on. I can't remember anymore. I've erased a lot of those memories. But yeah.
Wow. And you mentioned earlier that your parents always said, be a doctor. You can do anything you want, but be a doctor.
Yeah.
Were they still nagging at you after the second start to go back to school and be a doctor? Or did they give up on that after you had Rate My Politician?
I mean, no. So that didn't stop for a long time. So I was lucky enough to be awarded a 40 under 40 award in Ottawa just after I left Micrometrics, and I think that was the point where they stopped telling me I should go be a doctor, because there's something in the newspaper that said like, oh, like this guy kind of knows what he's doing. So that was right up until that point, like literally until like weeks before, they were like, Martin, it's not too late, you can go be a doctor, which has not happened and will not happen. I think they've come to terms with it now.
Yeah. I'm wondering, what did you want to be when you were like 7? It's probably not a doctor.
I don't know, like fighter jet pilot or jet fighter pilot. I don't know, man. I honestly, I don't know if it's that I've worked too many hours, but I don't have too many memories of my childhood anymore. I honestly don't even remember. Yeah. I don't know that there was anything that I like firmly wanted to be. I think I went through like a phase or two where I was like, I want to be a policeman, and then like 6 months later I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and then I honestly through my teens I just wanted to sit at home and play video games. I was like, what can I do that will allow me to sit at home and play video games all day? And I think I sat on that one for like close to a decade.
And so you ended up selling your shares in like Micrometrics.
Correct.
And now you're on the prowl for the next company.
So chronologically, in 2015, I sold my shares.
Yeah.
In Blockthrough, in Micrometrics, and there's a longer story, but the short story is I spent the summer looking at a few different ideas, and so I, after a long period, actually, how PG is this?
It's.
Can I tell the full story if it's a little like?
Oh yeah, it's all explicit content.
Cool, great.
Yeah.
So what the full story is that in the summer of 2015, I was looking at a few different ideas. Late one night, I ended up at an exotic dance bar with a friend of mine.
In Ottawa?
This was in Gatineau, which is on the Quebec side.
Yeah, more likely there than Ottawa.
Which Gatineau is renowned for its exotic dance bars. And so I was sitting there with a friend, and I wanted to get a private dance, and I didn't have cash, and I didn't have a debit card, so I couldn't withdraw any cash. And I thought to myself, this is fucking crazy. It's 2015, and I can't pay for a private dance with an exotic dancer without, with my credit card on my phone. This is bananas. And so I turned to my buddy and I kind of said, imagine if they had this sexy little lace garter with a chip that facilitated credit card payments. And he's like, dude, that's hilarious, but like you should look into that because Square is never going to go into it. It's just a market they're not going to touch. So I said, and imagine if that was called Tap That.
Wow.
So
you really thought about this.
I thought it was really funny. I have a tendency to go really deep on things that I think are hilarious. And so the next morning I kind of sobered up and I started to think about it some more. I'm like, it really is an untapped market. Got to tap that. So
yeah.
so I started doing some research, and I can't remember the numbers, but it was something absurd. It was something like $50 billion worldwide spent in that industry. I don't know how reliable my sources were, but it was a number big enough to make me think,
Oh, dude, like when I was an auditor, I used to audit investment banks.
Yeah.
And when you audit the small ones,
yeah,
auditors look at round numbers because those are like, someone's actually manually put that in. It's not a normal transaction. So people ask them, what's this petty cash of like $10,000?
Yeah.
And then I remember the CFO saying, one of the traders likes to go have fun, and he likes to be paid out in cash. So
that's funny.
Yeah, it's a big place, a big market for sure.
So I started to think about this seriously. I'm like, could this be a viable business? But more importantly, I was looking for a good co-founder. I was looking for an engineer that I could start a business with that I ultimately would find interesting. And I felt like the story was a really, really good filter, because if I pitch you Tap That and you don't find it funny or amusing in any way, we're not going to work well together. Like, I'm going to say much stupider shit than this. And if you can't deal with this, then like, sorry, man, we're not a fit. Like, it's not going to work out. So that I kind of like, on the one hand, I was legitimately doing the research. I was talking with dancers. I was talking with club owners, and like seeing like what would be the go-to-market. How would this work? Like building a viable business case for it, while at the same time mostly just looking for a co-founder that not only thought this was funny, but that I could work well together. And so what ended up happening is I went to a startup festival, Startup Fest, the aptly named Startup Fest, in Montreal. And I was walking around with these flashy red sunglasses, drinking beers all day, pitching people Tap That. And they have a grandma tent, and I even pitched the grandmas, which is what you're supposed to do. They thought it was hilarious. And so I met this really bright engineer named Chris, who thought Tap That was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. And we over beers together, we're even coming up with new product ideas. We're like, well, once this takes off, we can launch a bracelet for bartenders called Just the Tip, and launch a whole line of wearable payment systems that are based on sexual innuendo.
That's so good,
isn't it? It's great.
It's actually a great idea.
Thank you. And so I just want somebody to build it, man. I don't even care.
Yeah, I hope someone listens to this and builds it.
You want to throw me a point or two, that's great, but like, go for it, man. And so Chris and I, we go our separate ways. At the time, he's living in Toronto, I'm living in Ottawa. And we keep in touch. He gives me his number or his email or whatever. We keep in touch. We're talking like, for 3 weeks, we're talking almost every single day about how we're going to get Tap That off the ground. And after about 3 weeks, we were like, fuck, like this is wearables, so we're going to need a ton of money. It's going to take years before we get a product into market. It's also payments, and there's a lot of, like, there's some harder problems to solve around that. Plus, like, for both of us, it was number 3. Neither of us has ever, hit an out-of-the-park home run. And, if you fail on your third company, and it's a stripper payment app, and how do you explain that to investors? Like, yeah, fourth-time entrepreneur. Like, what was the last one? Oh, stripper payment system didn't work out. Like, we just felt like it was a bit of a like gamble with our careers, with our entrepreneurial careers. So we kind of said, okay, well, let's put that one on the back burner. Let's talk through some other ideas that we've had. And so we went through 2 or 3 before we said, wait, hold on, dude. Did I not tell you what I've been working on in my basement for the last 6 months? What I was looking for a co-founder for? I was like, no, you never brought it up. And so he tells me that he's built this technology that's able to get ads through adblockers in a way that can't be blocked, but also make it a lighter, faster experience. And I looked at this and I thought, well, A, I know nothing about ad tech, but fuck it, I can learn it. B, I use an ad blocker. And I'm also a previous business owner, so I understand that websites need to make money. But being an AdBlock user, I also understand that I actually don't mind a light ad experience, right? I don't mind seeing ads. What bothers me is like the interruptive nature. Some people don't like the privacy invasion. Some people don't like the risk of malware. Or I think most people don't like the risk of malware, but some people aren't aware that ads can have malware. And so I kind of looked at this and said, like, this makes total sense. Like, yeah, if a user has an ad blocker, they need to be monetized somehow. And if they're okay with a lighter experience, why not do that? And then lastly, the thing that I found sort of equally compelling is, at the end of the day, our product, our value to publishers is we make you more money without negatively impacting your user experience. And having come from 2 previous businesses that were centered around collecting more data or collecting data sets you don't have before, I learned that if you're starting a B2B, if you're building a B2B product, and there's no clear way to tie the use of that product to either making more money or saving money, then nobody's going to care, right? And so to have a product that literally makes people more money, a quantifiable amount of additive revenue, and that you can price on a revenue share model, it's brilliant. It's free money. It's to publishers. It's zero. There's no cost to the product beyond the time it takes to set it up. And so I found that as a third-time entrepreneur who had a couple, one total failure and one sort of minor financial success, but the product really didn't take off. To me, that was very important to have something that just had a very clear and compelling value proposition to its customers.
Gotcha. And you've been operating Blockthrough for close to about 3 years now, right?
Yeah, we had our 3-year anniversary a month and a half ago.
Nice.
Yeah.
And from our previous chats, I think I learned that Blockthrough didn't necessarily have the easiest runway. Your success, I think, has been relatively recent in the past 6 months or so, right?
That is absolutely correct. So the first 2.5 years of the company's history just fucking sucked. We tried to launch 3 separate iterations of the product, all of which did the same thing, but were architected slightly differently. They all failed. They just weren't able to generate revenue for publishers, or publishers weren't interested in sort of how we'd set up the product. And it wasn't until we made some changes towards the end of last year to our strategy and to the architecture of the product that we sort of turned things around. So the first 2.5 years, we never had more than 4 months of runway. We never succeeded in raising a full round. It was, I call it pay-as-you-go financing. It was like angel check here, angel check there, government grant here, working capital loan there, literally just enough to keep the lights on. And then second half of last year, as I mentioned, we made some changes, kind of rebooted the team, and relaunched the product in March of this year. And after relaunching the product, we went from $100 a month in revenue in March to this month. We're on track to do $135,000 in about 7 or 8 months. And there was a period of 6 straight months where we doubled every month, which was just incredibly exciting and just really, really fulfilling, considering the previous 3 years of grind, or 2.5 years of grind. So now we're in growth mode. The product that really took off. We were 5 people, 5 months ago, and so we've gone up to, I think we're 12 or 13 now. In a very, very quick period of time.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've, as I talked to you before the recording started, we just closed a round of financing. We're in the process of another transaction, which will go live soon, or which we'll announce soon. And things are looking good for us. And what's interesting is that the space we're in is a very challenging space. There is, not only is ad tech as a sector very complicated and very difficult to understand for somebody who's just getting into it, but on top of that, the ad blocking sort of niche of ad tech has this very, very nasty sort of cat and mouse dynamic between the ad blockers and the companies who are trying to monetize the traffic, and really nobody had solved the problem. Nobody had figured that out in an elegant way until we launched our product in March, and yeah, when we relaunched that product, we were the first ones to figure it out. It's difficult to deny from the numbers that we found product market fit, and we've permanently solved that cat and mouse problem. and now we're seeing our competitors try to replicate what we're doing. So it's a good feeling, but at the same time, it's like, fuck, we got to stay ahead of these guys.
Yeah, it's good. It's a constant competition, right? Every battle you got to win.
Yeah.
Or try to win, at least.
Yeah, exactly. So.
And what was it like actually getting that kind of finding investors to get financing? Like it
fucking sucked. I hate fundraising so much.
Yeah.
Maybe in 6 months I'll be like, you know what, like I've learned enough now. It's now I know how it works. But like, I never had success in the early days. Like maybe in the first year and a half, we raised like, I don't know, 80,000.
And how do you find these angel investors? Like, is it just like how I meet people? Like you just go on LinkedIn and message them and say, hey, I got this company. This is my idea.
I mean, that's one way. I mean, that's probably so. Like the lowest hanging fruit is like, if you know any angel investors, then they're likely to invest because they know you and they trust you, or hopefully they trust you, and they believe that you'll put in the hard work to make it work. There are different types of angels, right? There are angels who think they're VCs and they invest like VCs. There are angels who really are very founder focused and just want to invest in people that they like and believe in, and they want to see them succeed. And they're less focused on the return and more focused on like, yeah, it'd be great to see a return, but I want to pay it forward because when I was an entrepreneur, my angels helped me. And then there's sort of like the friends and family who like don't invest a lot, but like they like you and they're willing to bet on you. And so I think, I encountered all three. It took me a while to realize that like different angels invest differently. And really, I think what happened in our scenario is that I got so when you're selling and you just get rejected like 8 times in a row, you get in this funk, and where you just like you're not doing well anymore because you're in this funk. I was in a 2.5 year fundraising funk where like the early days nobody would invest in us because we didn't know the space, and they're like, well, I don't believe that you can pull this off. And then as things got along, they're like, well, like you're 2 years in, you don't have revenue, like why would I invest? And so it honestly was a lot of like just keep grinding and find the people that believe in us and as a team, and we barely pulled it off. There were multiple times where we had less than $1,000 in the account. We needed to make payroll, and that was sort of the cardinal rule for me is like I never want to miss payroll. I never want to be that guy who doesn't pay his people, and so I can proudly say I've never missed payroll. But it was very difficult to pull that off, and again, until just very recently, we'd never had more than $200,000 in our account.
Like for the company, right?
For the company, that's correct. Yeah, I wear it as a badge of honor now. I'm I think survive. Somebody, who was it? It was an angel that I talked to in San Francisco, who he didn't end up investing, but as I was describing to him like the story of the company, he's like, "Oh, you're a cockroach." I was like, "I'm sorry." He's like, "Yeah, like cockroach. Like cockroaches know how to survive." And I think he got that from like Paul Graham from Y Combinator, somebody from Y Combinator.
Yeah, something about like surviving is practically the main thing that matters.
Well,
really.
That's the thing is like if the way I view it is the longer you keep trying and the longer you survive and keep going at it, the higher the probability that you'll succeed. So like even if you don't have maybe the same natural gifts of a Mark Zuckerberg or whatever example you want to use, even if you don't have the same natural gifts, as long as you have a learning mentality and you just don't fucking stop, if you're relentless, eventually your probability of succeeding goes, approaches 100. And that's sort of how I viewed it. I mean, if you look at my story, I started my first company 8.5 years ago, and it took me 8.5 years to get to the point where I'm now the founder of a high growth company, and as recently as 6 years ago, I was an entrepreneur who'd been at it for 8 years without much success, and so I find that dynamic interesting. It's there's that saying that like I'm gonna mangle. I always do this. I always screw up sayings, but it's something like you're nobody's successful until they are, right? Anyhow, so I'm rambling now, but the idea for me is like if you're relentless and you keep pushing and you're persistent, then eventually you'll pull it off.
Yeah, and I guess just kind of weeding off of what you just said about like 8 years ago, you weren't, but now like close to 9 years, you are, running a high growth startup tech company, and I feel a lot of people will probably only look at this year and say, "Oh, cool," but there was like 8 years where you had to eat shit.
Yep.
And
ate a lot of shit.
Yeah. And I remember like what really hit me as like, yeah, entrepreneurship is really fucking hard was when you were telling me about your journey and earlier on when we first met, and you're saying how, yeah, I don't think I've ever paid myself more than $50K in like a full year.
Yeah. So that changed about a month ago. Now
Yeah.
I'm making a salary of $100K.
Wow. Good for you.
Doubled.
Yeah.
But like no, until this year, I'd never in any of my companies in previous jobs I'd made, well, depending on if you count commission or not, but $50K was sort of like the highest salary I'd ever earned working at one of my own companies, and not for a very long period of time.
And I think that's the thing with founders, right? Like you want to see your company succeed, and so you'd rather invest back into the company. And
I think that's the hallmark. One of the hallmarks of good founders is they're willing to do that. I think any founder who's not willing to like take a low salary or not take a salary, it's not guaranteed that they won't succeed, but it's indicative of the fact that unless they have kids, and that's obviously a different situation, but it's indicative of the fact that maybe they don't have the grind, the internal grind necessary to get there.
Could be. I remember reading about do you know Wayfair, the online furniture company?
I've heard of them. I don't know their story.
They're practically I think they're close to like an $8 billion company now, like they IPO'd and everything. And the founder, he still only takes an $80K salary. He's always kept it at that, and he's only just stayed at that the whole time because he's like,
good.
Yeah, I don't need it. But yeah, like that part definitely did resonate with me with like great founders or founders who care about the business. And in your journey of eating shit,
eating journey,
is there the most like memorable moment that you have where you just felt like this is the thing that's gonna kill me, but if I go over it, I think it'll be all okay.
I mean, Blockthrough has been very hard. It's now it's great, and like I'm fucking thrilled about the direction. But I would say like the last year and a half leading up to say June of this year. June of this year is when it started to look like, okay, like this thing is really taking off. Even May, it was like, oh cool, like we went from 1,000 to 10,000 a month, but like now what? Like, is it going to keep going? Is something going to fall apart? At a certain point you kind of get PTSD and you're like, something's going to go wrong. I know it. Like this is not going to work out for some reason that I haven't anticipated. And this time it didn't. But as the year and a half before that, it just fucking sucked. And it was really tough, and I had to at one point let go of my co-founder. So I'm the only founder left, if you will. And it's a really, I told myself 8 years ago I would never be a solo founder, and it sort of happened out of necessity. But it was just incredibly hard, being alone and having to figure out how you're going to pay these people salaries, people who are depending on you, people who have kids. It was emotionally very difficult, and I found myself, as recently as February, March. So this is like right as we're launching this iteration of the product, which today we know it took off and everything's great. But as recently as February, March, I was taking meetings with potential acqui-hirers to line up a backup plan. Basically like, hey, we're launching a fourth iteration of the product. We think it's going to be the best thing since sliced bread. But if it doesn't work out, like, I've been working on this for almost 3 years. I'm not going to keep, going through this emotional agony, for a company that's clearly not taking off. And I was having conversations with people about like, hey, like if we start to go under, like, are you going to be there to buy us? And I basically set a cliff for myself. I said, like, if we don't reach 20,000 a month by the end of June, by the end of Q2, I'm selling. Like Q3 is like I'm selling the company. That's all I'm doing. And so in March we did $100 in revenue. In April we did 1,000. In May we did something like 9,500. And June we hit 23,000. Really close. Yeah. And I mean, like, if we'd hit 19, I probably would have kept going. Like, I'm the kind of guy that, like, okay, we're seeing some cockroach. Yeah, I'm a cockroach. We'll take 15. That's fine. But we hit 23, and everything sort of flipped. It was now like, oh shit, like we're earning revenue. Like now like customer money is coming in to save my ass with payroll, not like investor money. This is great. And you know, we kept doubling it. The next month we did 47,000. The next month we did 100,000. And it just, I mean, that's what catalyzed the round. That's what catalyzed, you know, the other transactions. So I guess by the time this goes out, it'll be announced. But we're acquiring the assets of a defunct competitor. Ironically, the competitor is one of the guys that I talked with in February about buying us if we went belly up.
Wow, that's crazy.
And yeah, it's wild. And so, you know, their fortunes unfortunately inverted. They're really super, super awesome guys, and you know, it's unfortunate for them, but it's wild when you look back and say like, wow, I was this close to capitulating, and you know, now look at everything.
Yeah. Man, I have a lot more questions I want to ask, but I know you're a busy guy, so
how are we doing for time?
I think
we're coming to the end.
we're coming to the end, unfortunately. So we might do a part 2.
I'm game.
Yeah, I've done a part 2 with a few guests that we've run out of time on as well, and so we'll find some time in your schedule in the near future. But
look forward to part 2.
Yeah, but like the final rounds of the interview, I like to ask a couple of questions that every interviewer I like to hear the answers of. First question is, if your 20-year-old self were to look at you now, so third year Marty from U of Ottawa, what do you think his emotional reaction would be to where you're at running Blockthrough?
I would probably not believe it. Like my 20-year-old self?
Yeah.
I'd be like, what are you fucking talking about?
Yeah.
I just want to play video games.
Yeah.
No, like 20, I wouldn't have believed it at all. 25, I'd be like, oh, cool, I made it. Like, that's great. Like, I'd be thrilled. 20, I would be like, what universe did I step into? Like, this doesn't make any sense. I didn't even have those ambitions when I was 20. Yeah. And
any advice you would like to give that 20-year-old?
Yeah.
Or advice that you wish you had?
Just like make a concerted effort to get out of your shell, and to do things that scare you, and that challenge you, and that will force you to learn.
Excellent. All right, great, Marty. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
I had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please check out other episodes, and don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date for the future episodes. Also, I would really appreciate it if you would leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher, whichever is applicable to you. To see past episodes, you can go to oldmandan.com/podcasts. Also, you can sign up to my weekly newsletter on my blog, oldmandan.com/newsletter. You can stay up to date with future podcast episodes that way, and included in the newsletter are my book reviews I write, my weekly article related to the domain of self-development systems, as well as 7 things I learned throughout the week on being healthy, wealthy, and wise. Finally, special thanks to icons8.com for allowing me to use their music, Tiny People, on the podcast. Great. I will see you all next time. Take care.